So consider where you are in the political spectrum. Raise your hand if you think common ground exists with people on the other side. Yeah? Keep your hand up if you find it easy to find it. So we find it really hard to find common ground with people on the other side. We think we can't agree. And polarization's been going up from 1991 to 2001, 2004 to 2014. Some of it exacerbated by social media. But are we actually polarized? We can't agree? Or are we being presented with experiences that don't bring out our ability to find that natural common ground? Here is a study from 2004 asking Americans to estimate how much of the total wealth does the top 20% own. How much of the total wealth does the top 20% own? If you ask Democrats, they thought it was about 60% or 55%. But if you ask Republicans, they actually agree with how much they thought that the top 20% owned. But then if you ask them, okay, maybe that's fine, but what should the top 20% own? What's the ideal amount? How much should the top 20% actually have? And Democrats also, and Republicans, agree, basically, on what they think the top 20% should have. And yet the actual wealth the top 20% has is much, much, much more than what both the ideal and the estimate are. So if we agree, why are we fighting about this radioactive topic? Maybe we're not being asked the right questions. And what if we agree on more than we think? And maybe it's a matter of social media and technology not putting us into the kinds of group dynamics where you have these mass broadcasts at each other groups, which our brains are not designed and evolved for. So if you think about where are our minds naturally brilliant, if you gain awareness at basically finding common ground. So things like campfires, where we are much more easy to find reasonableness and openness and civility. Dinner tables are as ancient as any human experience, getting a drink with one another. And these things are based on certain features of those groups. So how big is the group size? How much trust is there? How many people are at the table? What are the well-framed questions? And there are things like living room conversations that give our brains the kind of trust signals we need because they create these small, safe spaces where a small number of people can engage in well-framed conversations, well-framed questions with good group facilitation, with diverse perspectives. This has actually been working. Or things like Change My View, which was actually born out of a Reddit channel that was basically noticed that if you give people the incentives to say, hey, I want you to change my view, I'm giving you an invitation to change my view about vaccination. And people, if you see this little delta 12 there, people are rewarded for the more that they actually change each other's minds. And this works so well that they actually have spun it out into its own situation. Now, what if finding common ground was easy? What if we made this as easy as accessing Wikipedia? Or this as easy as making content go viral on social media? What happens to polarization when finding common ground is easy? What happens to conspiracy thinking when common ground is easy? What happens to addiction when finding common ground is easy? It's easier to have these conversations. It has rippling out, cascading benefits. So, and what happens more importantly to our existential threats that depend on us agreeing and finding that common ground? And imagine that scaling up at scales where this was the default way that things like Facebook and Twitter were actually designed for. Smaller spaces with good group facilitation, with good shared questions.